The patient's role in testing. So a patient seeking a hearing test could vary in great deal in regards to age, education, motivation, their willingness to cooperate, whether or not they want to be there. And therefore, your testing approach is going to be different whether you're working with adults or children, whether your patient is cooperative or frightened, shy, or even hostile, like, I don't want to be here, my wife made me come. Procedures vary also depending on the degree of the patient's spoken language skills. So you might speak the same language, it might be easy, they could hear you, you could provide spoken language instructions. Written instructions might need to be provided if there's severe hearing loss or if there's a language barrier. Gestures or demonstrations may also be required. The patient needs to understand the instructions, what to listen for, and their role. So they need to know that every time there's a beep or they hear a sound, they're supposed to indicate that they heard that sound, whether it's through raising their hand or using a buzzer or just lifting a finger. What you're doing is you're searching for a threshold of hearing sensitivity. So you're searching for the lowest level at which the tones are barely audible. So sometimes it's tricky, so you need to tell the patient that they have to raise their hand whenever they hear a sound, even if it's a very, very soft sound. And false positives, false responses are rather common, and they could cause a misleading interpretation of results. So a false negative is when a patient fails to indicate that they heard a tone. They may have not understood the directions, or they may not be actually paying attention. So a false negative tends to suggest that a person's hearing is worse than it actually is, and it may also be seen in patients that are deliberately exaggerating their hearing loss. For example, if I were to put a tone in at a level that us with normal hearing could definitely hear, let's say 50 decibels, and you don't raise your hand, you're saying, no, I definitely don't hear a sound, but you're negative, you're false in your negative response in hearing the sound, right? So you're saying, no, I don't hear a sound, but you're false because you do actually hear that sound. So either you're not paying attention, you didn't understand the directions, or you're trying to make your hearing loss look worse than it actually is. A false positive response occurs when a patient raises their hand even though there's no sound. So they're positive that there's a sound, but they're false because you didn't put a sound in. So this could occur if there are long periods of silence, where the patient's like starting to get confused. Did they hear a sound or not hear a sound? So with this, when you see a lot of false positives or false negatives, the best thing to do is to stop and re-instruct the patient about their role in the testing, what they need to be listening for. Here's something that you could say. This is recommended by ASHA. You're going to hear a series of tones, first in one ear, then in the other ear. When you hear a tone, no matter how high or low in pitch, no matter how loud or no matter how soft, please signal that you heard it. Raise your hand when you first hear the tone and keep it up for as long as you hear the tone. Put your hand down quickly when the tone goes away, and remember to signal every time you heard a tone. Do you have any questions? You also might want to provide written instructions in the waiting room to help clarify what different tests you're going to be doing and what's intended with each test. When you're doing your testing, the patient must never be in a position to observe you, so small eye, hand, or arm movements could clue the patient in that you're sending in a tone. And you don't want the patient to get any visual clues. You want the patient to really just be listening. So that's why the patient's not going to face you when you're in the audiological booth. And you want to try to be discreet in your movements.